The August morning sun streamed through the windows of our high-rise apartment in Back Bay. The clock showed 7 o'clock. "Michael, you're heading out early again," I called out to my husband's back as he stood at our kitchen island. He hurriedly took a sip of coffee while adjusting the sleeve of his navy suit. Lately, this had become an increasingly common sight. "I've got an important meeting." "Don't wait up for dinner," he replied without turning around. His voice lacked its former warmth. True, his work as an investment analyst kept him busy, but this was different. Something had changed over the past 2 months. As I picked up my Starbucks takeout cup, my thoughts drifted to my sister Linda. Since May, we'd been letting her stay with us temporarily after she'd been evicted for falling behind on rent. Perhaps this was where it all began. "Linda, are you still sleeping?" I called toward the guest room upstairs, but there was no response. Last night too, I'd heard her and Michael talking until late. With a deep sigh, I checked my reflection in the mirror. As a high-end Boston real estate agent, immaculate presentation was essential. Navy tailored jacket and pencil skirt, with a Hermes scarf at my neck. On the table lay an expensive watch I'd specially borrowed for today's important meeting. "I'm heading out first. Let Linda know," I called to Michael as I put on my shoes at the entrance. Absorbed in his phone, he merely gave a slight nod. As I stepped into the elevator, I recalled my recent conversations with Linda. "Just because you earn more doesn't mean you can look down on me. I have talent, I just haven't been given the right opportunities. Your husband's noticed how much more attractive I am than you." At the time, I hadn't understood the meaning behind those words. Waiting for the train on the Green Line platform, I pulled out my phone. There was a message from my mother-in-law, Martha. "Ashley, could you come to the hospital this afternoon? I need to talk to you about something." Martha, hospitalized with heart disease, thought of me as her own daughter. Her presence was my emotional anchor these days. Looking out the train window at the Boston cityscape, I reflected. I'd worked desperately in this city until I was earning $300,000 a year. But perhaps that success was threatening to destroy something precious to me. Recently, Michael had seemed distinctly uncomfortable at my promotion celebration dinner. When clients addressed Mrs. Wilson, he'd frowned at realizing they meant me. His sense of inferiority about his $200,000 salary seemed to grow day by day. On my way to the office building in the financial district, I checked my phone. No messages from Michael. Instead, there was an unread message from Linda blinking. "I'm going out drinking with Michael tonight." A small seed of anxiety took root in my chest at that message. Through the window of Massachusetts General Hospital, I could see the gray sky. The August rain quietly trickled down the window pane, merging with the steady rhythm of the four-drip. It was just past 6 in the evening. The antiseptic smell permeating the room was somehow calming. This morning had felt different. Michael had left unusually early, and Linda was still sleeping. Before heading to work, I'd checked the luxury watch in the safe. As I'd suspected, it was gone. But at that moment, I still couldn't imagine the worst. "Ashley, I'm so glad you come to visit every day," Martha, my mother-in-law, spoke to me in a weak voice from her hospital bed. Though her complexion wasn't good, her eyes still held their usual gentle light. An 4-tube ran into her thin arm. "You're like a mother to me too," I said, gently squeezing her hand. The warmth of her touch was my greatest comfort now. Her condition, which had worsened since June, was gradually stabilizing. But thinking about what I had to tell her made my chest ache. Just then, my smartphone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Michael. A message that, when I saw it on the screen, made my world stop. Dear Ashley, let's end this. I've decided to start a new life with Linda. We used your luxury watch to fund our fresh start. This is my final message. Goodbye. My hands trembled slightly, but I couldn't let my voice betray me. I didn't want to worry Martha. I took deep, slow breaths. Read the message again. The memories of our cohabitation since May flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Linda using my cosmetics without permission. Her blatant behavior toward Michael. And their increasingly frequent outings together. All the dots were now connecting into a single line. Michael's demeanor had changed right after I closed a major deal and got promoted. At the celebration party that night, he'd been fidgety throughout. While everyone else was congratulating me on my success, he alone seemed out of place. Linda had been there too. She'd shown up in a flashy red dress, acting as if she were the star of the show. She'd sat next to Michael, frequently whispering in his ear. Looking back, perhaps they'd already become intimate by then. Ashley? You look pale. Martha's voice brought me back to reality. Outside, the rain had intensified. The fluorescent lights in the hospital room cast a cold, white glow. I'm fine. Just a little tired, I answered with my best attempt at a smile. Then I turned to my smartphone's keyboard and typed a brief reply. Enjoy yourselves. After hitting send, I let out a deep sigh. They didn't know that I had witnessed Michael rummaging through the house safe last Friday. They knew nothing about who really owned that watch. Since July, something had been off about the two of them. Michael's overtime increased, and his outings with Linda became more frequent. While I was busy with work, they must have been meeting in secret. My credit card statements showed large payments at unfamiliar restaurants. I remembered a conversation I'd overheard between them one night last month. They'd been sitting close together on the living room sofa. We're alike, you and I. Both suffering in Ashley's shadow. I can't take it anymore. Having her success thrown in my face. We deserve happiness too. Ashley doesn't need to monopolize everything, does she? That night, I'd quietly returned to my room. And began making necessary preparations. Consulting a lawyer. Filing a police report. And installing surveillance cameras in the safe. From the hospital room window, I looked down at the rain-soaked Boston streets. The lights of the high-rises shone against the cloudy sky. My smartphone vibrated again. This time it was the police. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for your call. We've confirmed the surveillance camera footage. We have records of your husband and Ms. Brown selling the Tiffany watch. As I quietly listened to the officer's voice, I was confirming that the trap I'd set last week had worked perfectly. The surveillance camera in the safe. The watch's true owner. Everything had gone according to plan. Ashley, are you really all right? Martha's voice interrupted my thoughts. Her eyes showed deep love and concern. Yes. If anything, this has made everything clear. I answered with a gentle smile. Outside, the rain grew stronger, beating against the hospital room window, as if heralding the storm to come. My phone screen displayed Michael and Linda's airline ticket reservations to California. They must think they can slip away quietly. One-way tickets to Los Angeles. Like something out of a movie. But they would soon realize the consequences of their betrayal. I quietly stood up and walked to the window. Boston's rain silently watched over the beginning of what fate had in store. The conference room at Boston Police Headquarters was enveloped in darkness. Detective Murphy spread out documents before me. Surveillance camera footage, bank transaction records, and Tiffany's sales records. All perfect evidence. Mrs. Wilson, the situation is clear. Your husband and Ms. Brown sold the watch at Tiffany's on Newberry Street yesterday at 3 p.m. The sale price was $500,000, far below market value. I slowly set down my coffee cup. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Could I see the surveillance camera footage? The screen showed Michael and Linda. They kept gazing at each other, laughing together. Like newlyweds. Michael wore an expression I'd never seen before, his arm around Linda's shoulders. We also have details about their escape plan. Detective Murphy pulled out new documents. One-way tickets to Los Angeles, departing tomorrow at 11 a.m. And a rental contract for an apartment in Santa Monica, California. The deposit has already been paid. I sighed deeply. My memory returned to last night. When I returned home, the house was already silent. Linda's belongings had disappeared from the upstairs guest room. A considerable amount of Michael's clothes had been taken too. But they had made one crucial mistake. Detective Murphy, when was this surveillance camera footage from? From 2:45 p.m. yesterday. We have everything recorded, from them taking the watch from the safe until they left the house. I took out my smartphone and opened a message from Helen Monroe. Ashley, understood about the important watch. Don't worry. Everything is recorded. Helen was Boston's premier real estate mogul. And the true owner of the watch. She had specially lent me that watch for an important business meeting. And had agreed to my request to install surveillance cameras in the safe. Arrest warrants have been issued for theft and fraud. We plan to take them into custody at the airport. Detective Murphy's voice echoed in the quiet conference room. Looking out the window, I reflected on the events that had led to this moment. In early July, I had closed a major deal. The contract for Boston's waterfront redevelopment project. The contract value exceeded $100 million. This success had earned me promotion to senior partner, the youngest in the company's history. That night at the celebration party, Michael had been visibly uncomfortable throughout. He'd watched me receive congratulations from others with a complex expression. Linda had been the same. She had been through 2 divorces, and her work as an interior designer was unstable. Distanced from her parents and accumulating debt, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her. Behind her words lay deep jealousy toward me. And those feelings had surely corroded Michael's heart as well. Mrs. Wilson, let me explain the details of tomorrow's operation. Detective Murphy's voice brought me back to reality. A floor plan of Logan Airport was spread out on the desk. At 9 a.m., they're expected to leave home. They'll likely take a taxi. Estimated arrival at the airport around 9:45. We'll execute the arrest in the departure lobby before security check. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Martha. Ashley, I heard from Michael. Are you two separating? Her voice trembled. I took a deep breath and answered quietly. Martha, everything will become clear tomorrow morning. Please don't worry. By the time I left the conference room, the rain had stopped. Stars were beginning to appear one by one in Boston's night sky. The next morning, Logan Airport's departure lobby was filled with its usual bustle. I sat at a cafe table, drinking coffee while watching the entrance to the security checkpoint. According to Detective Murphy's message, the taxi carrying Michael and Linda had already arrived at the airport. Finally, I saw them. Michael in a new suit, Linda in a flashy red dress. They held hands, talking with smiles on their faces. Their expressions were full of anticipation for their new life ahead. Suddenly, several police officers surrounded them. The blood drained from Michael's face. Linda screamed and collapsed on the spot. Michael Wilson, Linda Brown. You are under arrest for theft and fraud. Detective Murphy's voice rang out across the lobby. Surrounding travelers stopped in their tracks with surprised expressions. That's when Michael spotted me. His eyes held a complex mix of anger, fear, and regret. Why? His voice trembled slightly. I slowly stood up and approached them. The surrounding commotion seemed like distant noise. That watch wasn't mine. At my words, their expressions froze. The true owner is Helen Monroe. And there were surveillance cameras in the safe. Linda broke down crying, and Michael was speechless. The officers handcuffed them and led them away. Watching their retreating backs, I quietly whispered to myself. This ends it all. And a new life begins. Through the airport's large windows, I could see the clear blue sky. Boston's sky was bathed in refreshing light, as if after a storm. The courtroom at the John Adams Courthouse was tense with anticipation. The late September sunlight slanted through the high windows, illuminating the heavy wooden furnishings. I stood at the witness stand, having just quietly completed my oath. Judge Sarah Harrison, a dignified woman in her 70s, surveyed the courtroom with a stern expression. Witness, please explain about the watch. Prosecutor James Morrison addressed me. A tense silence fell over the courtroom. That watch is a limited edition Tiffany model. Only 10 were manufactured worldwide. I began my explanation matter-of-factly. In the defendant's seats, Michael and Linda remained head down, motionless. And who is the true owner of this watch? Ms. Helen Monroe. She specially lent it to me for an important business meeting. At that moment, a small murmur spread through the courtroom. Michael looked up with a shocked expression. Linda covered her face with her hands. Please elaborate. I took a deep breath and began recounting the events leading up to that day. In early July, after securing the large contract for Boston's waterfront redevelopment project, I was pursuing an even bigger deal. Negotiations with a major New York real estate development company. The contract value exceeded $200 million, the most important case of my career. For that meeting, Helen Monroe specially lent me that watch. The prosecutor presented new photographic evidence. It showed surveillance camera footage from the safe, clearly recording the moment Michael opened it and removed the watch. Did the defendants know this watch was actually borrowed? No. I hadn't told them. At my words, Michael's face turned pale. Linda trembled slightly. Why did you install an alarm system? From mid-July, something seemed off about the two of them. And I had noticed Michael paying unusual attention to the safe several times. I explained the situation in detail. The increasing overtime, unnatural outings, and their close relationship. Everything had been carefully observed. Prosecution, please call your next witness. The judge's voice rang out. The next witness was Helen Monroe. She entered the courtroom exuding the dignity of success. An upright posture belying her late 60s. Dressed in a Chanel suit, her natural makeup highlighting her energetic expression. Ms. Monroe, please tell us about your relationship with the stolen watch. Helen smiled gently. That watch is one of my collections. A special Tiffany model limited to 10 pieces worldwide, priced at $2 million. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Why did you lend such an expensive watch to Mrs. Wilson? Ashley is like a daughter to me. I highly value her talent and integrity. And for that important meeting, she needed to demonstrate appropriate prestige to her business partners. Helen continued quietly. Considering the possibility of theft, I suggested installing surveillance cameras in the safe. It was a natural precaution for protecting a $2 million watch. The blood drained further from Michael's face. Linda began sobbing. For how much did the defendants sell this watch? $500,000. Helen's answer caused another stir in the courtroom. That's less than a quarter of its actual value, correct? Yes. Moreover, the sale was completely illegal. I hold ownership rights to the watch, and no one had authorization to sell it. The trial continued into the afternoon after a recess. In the hallway, I exchanged words with Helen. Ashley, your calm judgment was correct. I nodded slightly at her words. In the afternoon session, Michael and Linda's defense presented their arguments. However, against the decisive evidence, it was merely a futile resistance. Defendants, do you have any final statements? At the judge's question, Michael slowly stood up. I was foolish. I couldn't genuinely be happy for my wife's success. And that sense of inferiority drove me mad. His voice trembled. When I met Linda and we empathized with each other, we lost our reason. Our jealousy and hatred toward Ashley blinded us. Linda also stood up and began speaking through tears. I hated you. Your success seemed to highlight my life's failures, but that was all my own weakness. The verdict was as expected. Michael received a 2-year prison sentence. Linda was given a 1-year suspended sentence. And they were ordered to pay $2 million in damages. As I left the courthouse, I didn't look back. The blue sky outside seemed to shine brilliantly, as if celebrating the beginning of a new life. Ashley. Martha, my mother-in-law, was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Despite being hospitalized, she had come in a wheelchair. Martha. You made the right choice. Integrity always pays off. She gently squeezed my hand. In that warmth, I felt new hope. A pleasant autumn breeze blew across the plaza in front of the courthouse. Helen Monroe approached me and said quietly, "Now, let's start a new project. You have even greater potential." I nodded deeply. This trial wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new life. In the twilight sky, the orange sun was setting. It seemed to signal a farewell to the past. In my heart, a new chapter was about to begin. 1 year later, autumn. Boston's Back Bay district had entered the beautiful season of fall foliage. Red and yellow leaves danced along Commonwealth Avenue's tree-lined street, accompanied by the laughter of people enjoying weekend brunch. I was having coffee with Helen Monroe at a cafe on Newbury Street. The Wall Street Journal lay open on the table, featuring a large article about our new project. A fresh wind in Boston real estate, Helen Monroe and Ashley Wilson's innovative initiative. "Ashley, you've done remarkably well this past year." Helen smiled gently. Our new joint venture had achieved even greater success than anticipated. Next generation environmentally conscious high-rise development. It was more than just business, it was the embodiment of our ideals. "Helen, it's all thanks to your guidance." "No, this is your talent. You've grown stronger after overcoming that ordeal." I gazed out the window. Among the passers-by, I occasionally spotted familiar faces. Former colleagues and business contacts. They all gave me warm glances. Michael was still serving his sentence in prison. Several letters had arrived from him, but I hadn't replied. That was my way of drawing a line under the past. I heard that Linda, while on probation, had started a new life on the West Coast. Though still estranged from her parents, she was attending counseling and gradually beginning to examine herself. "By the way, how are things progressing with David?" I blushed slightly at Helen's question. David Carter was an architect gaining attention in environmental building design. We'd met through our project, and lately, we'd been going out to dinner more frequently on weekends. Slowly, but surely. Helen nodded with satisfaction at my answer. There's no need to rush. True love needs time to nurture. In the afternoon, I visited Massachusetts General Hospital. Martha's condition had improved significantly over the past few months. "Ashley, I saw today's newspaper. I'm so proud." Bright sunlight streamed into the hospital room, and autumn flowers in a vase spread their gentle fragrance. "Martha, I'm really looking forward to your discharge next week." "Yes, and let's invite David for Christmas too." My mother-in-law's eyes twinkled meaningfully. In the evening, I returned to my penthouse apartment. Standing on the terrace overlooking the Charles River, watching the sunset, I reflected on the past year. Sadness, anger, and the pain of betrayal. They certainly left deep wounds in my heart. But those wounds taught me important lessons. What true strength means. What trust means. And what love means. My phone rang with a message from David. "There's a yacht race at Cape Cod this weekend. Would you like to come along?" I smiled as I typed my reply. Lovely. Looking forward to it. Wine and cheese were laid out on the terrace table. The red wine in my glass caught the sunset's light, casting a deep glow. Come to think of it, yesterday I heard unexpected news about Linda. She was holding a solo exhibition of interior design at a small gallery in San Francisco. The theme of her works was atonement and rebirth. Perhaps it was her way of making a fresh start in life. Last week, I received a message from Michael through the prison counselor. I am truly sorry. Just one line. But the regret and penitence conveyed in those words were genuine. The first stars began twinkling in the night sky. The city lights reflected on the Charles River's surface sparkled like jewels. On my desk lay the proposal for a new project. A next-generation sustainable urban development plan to pursue with Helen. The largest budget scale yet. But more important than that was the vision we had invested in this project. Everyone deserves a chance to start over. That was a phrase Helen often used. I took a deep breath and turned my gaze to the night view. In this city, I had been wounded and healed. Betrayed and found new bonds. The clock showed 8 in the evening. Bach's Air on the G-string began playing from the grand piano in the living room. This was David's favorite piece. Besides being an architect, he was also an amateur pianist. Tomorrow, there would be a press conference for the new project. Then lunch with David. And on the weekend, the yacht race at Cape Cod. Life moves in unexpected directions. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Perhaps it's that very unpredictability that makes life rich and fascinating. Leaning against the terrace railing, gazing at the city lights, I smiled quietly. This is my new life. And this story has only just begun. In Boston's night sky, the stars increased their brilliance one by one.